She always marks me with her lipstick.
You bet.
My mother once told me I was going to hell if I didn't change my ways, and judging from the heat around here, I think I'm pretty close. My name is Edgar Fouche. I'm here to speak about secret government technology, reverse engineering of alien artifacts, and the top secret MJ-12 committee, which I write with my author, Brad Steiger. Brad, as you know, has published 143 books and has 15 million copies in print, which is pretty incredible. Before I'm through, you'll know exactly what the flying triangle is, the one that's been sighted around the world. It's the most exotic and classified aerospace vehicle that's ever been built. It may be stealthily hovering over Phoenix, Belgium, or your city. I'll show you pictures of Air Force aircraft I've worked, declassified Air Force aircraft, and classified aircraft that's never been seen before. I'll also explain how we come upon that technology. First, I'll share some of my family background. I was born to fifth-generation French Americans, and many of my relatives for generations have been involved with the government in fields of intelligence, crypto, and classified development projects. This is true as far back as Joseph Fouché in the French Revolution, where he was the prime minister under Napoleon. He was the head of the French Secret National Police Force and a direct ancestor of mine. Joseph Fouché started the first organized intelligence organization in the world. The CIA, the Russian KGB, the English MI5, the Israeli Mossad, and many other intelligence agencies have used and expanded upon his methods of intelligence gathering, networking information, and political survival. Some French historians consider him a scoundrel because he survived Napoleon and the King of France. My career background spans 30 years, and since the government isn't about to support my claims, you'll see from the positions I've held, the programs I've worked, that I was in a position to gather the information I'm presenting. My first job was as a machinist making bombs for the U.S. Air Force at R.G. Letourneau. I would be involved with the Department of Defense in one way or other for the next 25 years. After being drafted into the Vietnam conflict, I initially went through a year of intelligence, communications, and cryptological schools. During the years 1967 through 1974, I was stationed or worked at many of the Tactical Air Command, Air Training Command, Pacific Air Forces Command bases. During the Vietnam conflict, I was assigned to special projects at Kadena Air Force Base, Okinawa, Udon Air Force Base, Thailand, Ben Hoa Air Force Base, Vietnam, and spent anywhere from a day to a month at many other Southeast Asian bases. With my training and experience as intelligence equipment, special electronics, black programs, and cryptological areas, I received other government opportunities. I filled major command liaison positions, headquarters manager, DOD factory representative for TAC, SAC, ATC, and PACAF. Later in my career as a defense contractor and engineering manager, I dealt with classified black programs, developing state-of-the-art electronics, logistics, and technical data, and automatic test equipment. I was considered an Air Force expert with classified electronics countermeasures, test equipment, cryptological test equipment, and automatic test equipment. I worked with many of the leading aircraft manufacturers and Department of Defense contractors. I participated as a key member in flight operational test and evaluation, design, development, production, programs, state-of-the-art avionics, including electronics countermeasures, satellite communications, cryptological equipment, and support equipment. During my career, I was handpicked development cadre for many of the Air Force's newest fighter and bomber development programs. I was cadre for the F-111 Swing Wing bomber, the F-15 Eagle Air Superiority Fighter, the A-10 Warthog Close Air Support Fighter. Next slide. the F-16 Falcon fighter, next slide, and the P-1 Lancer bomber. Next slide. Other research and development programs I've worked as far back as the 70s are still classified top secret. I received over 4,000 hours of technical training from the military and the government, about which of half was classified. This is a picture of the Boeing F-22 Raptor, air dominance fighter. My involvement with black programs developing stealth aircraft is still classified. I am perhaps the only person who has actually worked at top secret Groom Lake Air Base within Area 51 of the Nellis Range and written about it and can prove it. I spent 20 years working directly for the U.S. Air Force and DoD agencies. That's a F-117 at Groom. Followed by another 8 years as a defense contractor manager. My last position for the Air Force was Strategic Air Command Liaison. As a defense contractor manager, I performed as engineering program manager and site manager for DoD contractors involved in classified development, logistics support, and electronics engineering. I am now CEO of Fouche Media Associates, which I run with my beautiful wife, Rebecca. I'm also the inventor of NeuroSync Mime, a behavior modification software using hypnotic entrainment and subliminal messages. I wrote Alien Rapture: The Chosen in 1994 and 95 after my last trip to California, New Mexico, and Nevada. I undertook this trip to do research for Alien Rapture, which included a meeting with 5 close friends who agreed to release confidential information to me and discuss their closely guarded personal experiences. Also interviewed other contacts who had worked classified programs, such as SR-71 pilots and engineers on black programs, and others who had flown classified development aircraft to gather information on UFO sightings and contact. At this point, I was blessed with teaming up with a great man and a great writer, Brad Steiger, who's a great friend also. I had decided to get out of the defense industry as I felt the fraud, waste, and abuse was rampant both on the government and contractor sides. I wanted to work for myself as a writer and develop my own ideas and products. So far, I've been a terrible boss. I've worked myself incredibly long hours with no benefits and a meager salary. Who were the 5 friends and co-conspirators, I like to call them, and a host of others, you might ask? The first friend was Gerald, a former NSA National Security Investigator and TREAT team member. TREAT stands for Tactical Reconnaissance Engineering Assessment Team. I think some of you call them Men in Black. He worked for the Department of Energy and the National Security Agency. This was his cover, but ultimately the National Security Agency controlled all his movements and everything he did. His job required him to watch employees with top secret and Q clearances and other classified clearances at the Nevada test site, the Nellis Range, Los Alamos, Sandia, and many other bases. He spent a lot of time out at Area 51 for years before I even knew what he was involved in. This is where previously the most classified aerospace testing in the world took place. You may know it as Groom Lake, Watertown, the Ranch, or Dreamland. He was found dead of a heart attack a year after our last meeting. The second friend, Sal, was a person who worked directly for the National Security Agency with electronics intelligence, or ELINT, and became a defense contractor upon his retirement. The third friend, Doc, was an SR-71 spy plane pilot and a U.S. Air Force test pilot at Edwards Air Force Base. The fourth friend, Dale, and I were in the service together during the Vietnam conflict, and I've known him since the early 70s. His father worked for the NSA for over 25 years, and he's the one that sent me the MJ-12 documents. I'll discuss the MJ-12 documents last. The fifth friend, Bud, was a DoD contractor, electronics engineer, worked top secret development programs dealing with electronics countermeasures, radar homing and warning, ECM jammers, and infrared receivers. He retired as a program manager and later died of a brain tumor within 30 days after his symptoms appeared. I also received input from 4 other SR-71 pilots, 2 U-2 pilots, a TR-1 pilot, and about 24 fighter and bomber jocks. I got the picture of the TR-3B, or a person in this latter group. At the time, I had no intention of writing about programs I was involved in due to the Secrecy Act and classification documents I had signed. I had my fill of working for the government and defense contractors. However, it bothered each of us that we'd had experience with unusual phenomena, extremely advanced technology, and witnessed unidentified aerial contact that had not been previously reported. As we sat at a table in a dark corner of the Silver Dollar Saloon in Las Vegas, discussing our experiences and swapping knowledge, each of the group of 5 assured me that they trusted me enough to write about their secrets and protect them. We agreed to get together the next year with an understanding that I would contact each of them and set up the meeting. In the meantime, I wrote down all of our notes and their input and their contacts from other friends about unusual phenomena and their personal sightings. Many of the things the group revealed to me were startling, even to me, who had worked 25 years on black programs. I used the information to piece together the story now titled Alien Rapture: The Chosen. I'm going to share some of these secrets and unusual phenomena with you this afternoon. The SR-71 was designed as a spy plane for the CIA in the 60s and designated the A-12. The Mach 3 Plus aircraft first flew in 1962, taken off from Groom Lake Air Base in Area 51. Later, once the Air Force took over the operation, it was designated the SR-71 Blackbird. My friend Chuck, an SR-71 pilot, related to me an in-flight incident he had in the 1970s. He was returning from a reconnaissance flight, was at an altitude of 74,000 feet and a speed of Mach 3, 3 times the speed of sound. He noticed something flickering in his peripheral vision. Hovering over his left wingtip was a ball of dense plasma-like light. When he stared at it for more than a few seconds, it hurt his eyes. Chuck tried to use his UHF, VHF, and HF communication sets to no avail. There was nothing but static. Repeatedly glancing at the ball of light, he watched in amazement as it moved effortlessly about his aircraft. At one point, the light positioned itself a few feet in front of the spiked cone of the air intake inlet. The enormous amount of air rushing into the engines should have sucked in and shredded almost anything in its path, but the light orb was mysteriously unaffected. The light, he noted, acted in a curious manner, if something inanimate could act in a curious manner, or act in any manner at all. It moved from time to time to other parts of the aircraft, staying until his approach to Beale Air Force Base, California. It was inside of the air base when the plasma ball finally pulled away from the aircraft in a wide arc at ever-increasing speeds. Of course, after reading his incident report, his operations commander told him never to speak of this incident. When Chuck related the story to me, he was absolutely convinced this plasma ball was controlled by some form of intelligence. I have over 24 stories from pilots of similar incidents with UFOs and plasma balls. Have you ever heard stories about missing memory? Sal worked a program for 2 years in a top secret research facility in California. At the end of the program, he started having flu-like symptoms. And after several days of worsening symptoms, went to his company doctor. His company prescribed some medication and sent him home for 2 days. On the 3rd day, he woke up and couldn't remember where he worked or who he worked for. He called his brother. His brother, in a panic, called up the company. The company informed him that his job had been terminated because his contract had run out. Sal was the SR-71 pilot I spoke of earlier. To this day, And I can't say to this day. I haven't heard from Sal in 2 years. The only thing he could ever reconstruct was from his pay records, letter of offer, and his personal notes, engineering notes, to convince him he actually had worked there. The company in question was involved in developing the TR-3B gravity disruption device called the magnetic field disruptor, which is the circular accelerator part of the TR-3B, which I'll go into more detail in a minute. Have any of you ever heard of the super strong foil-like material at Roswell? I'm sure most of you heard something about it. Another friend who worked for General Dynamics in Fort Worth described a program in which he worked at a plasma accelerator in the mid-60s, researching gravity warping techniques. He is a physicist by education and trade. This was his first top secret program. He described a foil-like material, much like that discovered after Roswell crash. He described the foil as 12 layers of material less than 10,000ths of an inch thick. It was as flexible as a plastic trash bag, but virtually indestructible to piercing, burning, or cutting, which you've probably all heard before. Here's what you haven't heard. In order to cut the material used for the project, the material was supercooled, a large electrical charge was applied to polarize the molecular structure, and a laser cutter was applied in order to cut this material. Large ribbons of this material were used to reinforce the accelerator, which contained the mercury-based plasma that they started researching in 1965. The plasma was cooled to superconductive temperatures, rotated at 45,000 revolutions per minute, and pressurized at 150,000 atmospheres. This would be considered state-of-the-art technology even today, some 30 years after he worked the project. 33, okay. Yeah. He related that the project achieved this objective. Instruments and test objects placed within the center of the accelerator showed a 50% loss in weight attributed to the reduction in the gravitational field. You'll hear a little bit more about this technology when I address the TR-3B and the magnetic field disruptor. From 1973 through 1976, I was home base at Edwards Air Force Base. It is near Lancaster, California, and even near the San Andreas Fault. Edwards has a long history of secret technology and experimental aircraft. It's a shame that's not clear. That's a B-2 stealth aircraft. It's a beautiful picture. The YB-49 was flown in 1948 at Edwards Air Force Base, which looks a lot like the B-2 stealth bomber. The XB-70 was first flown in 1964 and looks a lot like the new top secret SR-75 the Air Force says doesn't exist. Edwards is the home of the U.S. Air Force Test Pilot School and is responsible for flight operational test and evaluation of the Air Force's newest aircraft. It hosts a number of tenant organizations, including NASA and a Jet Propulsion Laboratory facility. I worked the F-111 Swing Wing Bomber, the F-15 Air Superiority Fighter, the F-16 Fighter, the A-10 Close Air Support Attack Aircraft, and the B-1 Stealth Bomber. I was involved with these and other classified development programs when they were just a gleam in some pilot trainees' eyes. One night, a longtime friend of mine and I were standing on top of the Fairchild A-10 hangar at Edwards Air Force Base. It was 2 a.m. and a perfectly clear night with millions of stars visible to the naked eye. This was a very common night at Edwards. I noticed a group of stars we were looking at seemed to be shifting in color, and at the time I could name quite a few constellations. I'd just taken an astrology course, and I definitely knew what the Big Dipper was. I made a C in that course, I think, or a B. So I pointed out to my friend that the 3 stars near the Big Dipper in triangular formation were not supposed to be there. We watched as the strobing stars shifted in color from a bright blue to a reddish yellow. After a period of about 20 minutes, we could tell that the objects weren't stars because they were getting larger. This was somewhat unnerving. It was further unnerving when the space in between the stars started blocking out the stars in the background. We decided it probably was a top secret Air Force vehicle of some type. Still, we weren't sure. At the time, I didn't believe in UFOs. And that's the honest truth. The vehicle had gone from half the size of the Big Dipper to twice its size in a half hour. It had moved from the west to the east towards Edwards Air Force Base. About that time, we could make out the silhouette or outline of the triangle. The lights, or possibly exhaust, flared brighter and vanished in an instant from the sky. This experience wasn't my first sighting, but it was one of the few where I had a witness. In the summer of 1976, I relocated to Nellis Air Force Base, north of Las Vegas. I spent 3.5 years there. I worked primarily with the F-15 electronics countermeasures and automatic test equipment. I'd heard rumors of air bases located in the desert at places called Mercury, Indian Springs, and others that didn't even have names at the time. Before the fall of the Berlin Wall and the collapse of the USSR, no one talked about their classified work experiences, nor did we repeat rumors of top secret technology or aircraft. Most of us who had top secret clearances never even told our wives what programs we were working, or where we were going. I once spent 6 months in Vietnam while my wife thought I was at a classified school in Denver, Colorado. The military in a court of law has actually denied the existence of classified Air Force Base inside the Nellis Range, out in the Nevada desert, within Area 51. Don't you know the plaintiffs and the lawyer were surprised to hear this? But that's another story. I was one of the few personnel at Nellis who had top secret clearance with crypto access and was certified on specific NSA cryptological equipment. I was certified on the Mode 4 IFF system for aircraft also, which uses encrypted codes. It was due to a combination of coincidence and my technical experience and my certification that I was requested to be temporarily assigned to a place which had no name. I was told by my commander to report to an office on the base. He didn't know where I was going to be working or how long I was going to be gone. And he was pretty ticked off at me because at the time we were fielding the F-15 electronics countermeasures equipment, and it was critical. And I think to this day he remembers that. I left the first Monday morning at 4:30 a.m. before sunrise. We boarded a blue Air Force bus with the windows blackened out. There were 28 other people on the bus on the first trip, including 2 security policemen with M16s and a bus driver. There was only one thing said to us for the whole trip. When we got on the bus, they told us, do not speak. And when the bus closed the doors, he repeated, do not speak unless you're spoken to. Well, if you ever had an M16 pointed in your direction, you don't talk. So we just, and it was pretty bad because the windows were, you couldn't see anything. And eventually this fine silted dust started coming in the windows and you knew you were out in the desert.